Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. I'm Dave Lees.
And I'm Jonathan Byer. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Merry Christmas, Happy Japanese Nationals. This is this and that. We are going to be discussing everything that's going on at Japanese Nationals. Also, Jonathan's been sick, so he's doing this one. He's not doing Russia. He's
I'm
stomach.
really bringing my A game. I'm like, Kaori was great.
Like Marin Honda, you're in it to win it. Okay.
Yeah, no matter what. No matter what.
And this was going to be her last competition. And right before she had a hip injury, and we know she's not the quickest rotator on planet Earth. Now that you add the hip problem, okay, here's the thing. It was still my favorite performance of Japanese Nationals. Like she's
No, even if like the short program wasn't necessarily like the genre I love her in most, just the way she just like goes from point A to point B inherently has so much quality.
just the way that she holds her body and feels music, the way that she dresses herself, everything. She's the most interesting one there and has been for so many years. But here's the thing. I feel that Japanese Nationals has never been kind to Marin Honda. Never her competition, right? Yeah. I go in expecting, 11th place. Like I just have, we've had some history with this. And now first place in my heart, absolutely. We didn't get to see The Little Mermaid, which was upsetting to me because I believe maybe they could invite her to the gala or something. They probably do that based on results in Japan. They've just never loved her enough. And I don't understand why. She was performing with a K-pop group recently. Is her sister in a K-pop group? We need a whole update on the family, like what they're all doing. What's the brother doing?
I just remember I was living in Europe. This must have been like, it was either late 2016 or early 2017 when you had me watch that entire soap opera with her sibling on it. With like remember like the murdering housekeeper or whatever.
The housekeeper like burned down the house or
yes,
something. But they were still very Japanese about it. Like it was a respectful burning down of the house. It wasn't like Sunny came home. Okay, like it was really, it was not like the TLC episode of Behind the Music where she's like, I burned that house down. No, this housekeeper did it in a very respectful way, right?
Yeah, a little bit more menacing. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I am willing to watch this because I will do anything for Marin.
Like it wasn't emotional. It was a planned arson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I loved it. I love her. She and Shoma can go off in the wilderness. Hopefully, obviously, we will still see her skate. But I was just thinking, like,
are they still together?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was still a thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Jonathan. And like, I can't think of a better couple of two of our favorites. Okay. Like they belong together. Shoma, who's playing the video games all the time. Marin, who told us that her goal was to become a flight attendant. And clearly Mia Hamada never loved her the most, but should have. And I don't know. They're just so right for each other. Like if they could ice dance together, is he taller than she is? I don't see many photos together.
Well, again, as we've often talked about solo dance, I mean, she is perfect for it.
Does she have the power for it though?
Yeah, but what was the holdup when she was trying dance?
I don't know what happened when she was trying dance.
And again, I was vocal for that. And as we saw here, 8 bazillion women of talent, 8 bazillion men of talent, 1 pair entry, and like 3 dance entries. Like
Marin is also someone who's inherently talented, right? I think the problem if you are someone like that and you're switching to pairs or dance, I imagine the frustration of learning the tracking and the unison is so hard. If you are just used to doing everything at your own pace and now you have to jump with someone else, it might make you go a little bit Deanna about it. Right. Like I just think that you might have some moments. And respect, but yeah, not the best. And here we didn't.
I would have guessed dance, but you're saying what she might be lacking in the power for the jumps could show up in the dance as well.
Oh yeah, like imagine if you have to do twizzles, and like first of all, twizzles are done. Everything in dance is far stricter than singles, right? So the depth of the edge on the curves of what they're looking for. So there is a big transition if you are switching from singles to dance. It's not just that you have to learn moves, you have to relearn how you do certain edges. And I think that that's one of the, like, there's a ice dance counter and there is a figure skating, counter, right? Like there is like just the way that they perform moves and the quality. So I think for someone like Marin, it actually would be rather challenging. And we do see it a lot with these teams that we really like Zingis and Kolesnik, and the Finnish dance team. There are still elements of those skaters, while they have such wonderful aesthetics on the ice, that what they're doing from the ankle down could use some work. Like they still look new.
Freestyle looking or something.
Yes.
Okay.
So, like, think how long it's actually taken Tim Coletto to get good at ice dance. Sometimes mentally, you just don't have that in you to learn another discipline. Sometimes you do. If you look at Kosternaya, I think that it's reinvigorating her. It's making her reach her potential in some ways. Not that she's reached it yet as a pair girl, but I think it can go one of two ways. I think you could either be so tired from your skating career, or you could be re-energized in some way. And I would be curious to kind of know where Marin is at. I could also see her being the type to take a year off and come back in a new discipline or in a new way or something like that. I mean, she's clearly a performer, so
Yeah.
to be missed.
And that I will have to say, like, Japanese nationals, always a favorite. It seems like time has caught up a little bit. And now we are getting some more formulaic, interchangeable kind of programs and presentations of that middle pack in particular. I find more where, like, when we first were covering these back in like the late teens and stuff like that, each one was vastly different. Each one was enormously unique. And slowly, as the figure skating world has become so carbon copied, I'm afraid it is starting to happen here as well.
Well, we sort of looked around, but oftentimes, and this is something that happens, is that for a figure skating choreographer to go to Japan, they will typically have booked 5 or 6 jobs to fly over there and work with those.
The trip, of course, yeah.
And then with IJS and the fact that there are so many skaters and they're not really distinctive to start with, I think that the choreographers, especially for Japanese women, have a way of putting them all in pastels and making them very pleasant. And there's a certain kind of gentle aesthetic, right? Which is great. But I think you can see that there are many Japanese women that need more development. And I do think that some of that is the up and down nature of the different skaters. We have, a skater who was at the Olympics, who's now in 5th place in the short program here, kind of an afterthought. You forget that she exists. Wakaba is someone who did stand out, who has that unique charisma and power. When she is still coming back, I'm wondering, like, does she just need another year, or is this it?
Don't you think? Because it was interesting, like, I saw the results before we were able to scrounge up the footage. And I thought, uh-oh, this could be a really bad omen. But when I saw it, I was like, I don't know, these are the kinds of the mistakes that I believe she's right there. She's just in process. Do you find it a little bit of a lost cause at this moment? To me, given that it's relatively late in the game, her comeback, which was just that Grand Prix, I think in France, I was like, I don't know. She seems more on track than she might have been otherwise.
I feel mixed about it. So, and I'll talk it out. She has had ups and downs in her career, right?
Always.
After the medal at the World Championships, it took 3 years for her to be back at her best, right? And I do think in terms of that, I could see her continuing to improve and continuing to get better. She still seems like she has the winner's heart, like deep inside, the fact that she's going for that triple axel and trying it. Like it's still.
And again, that kind of attempt that tells me she was probably landing some.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Oh, yeah.
The percentage is probably decent, but not where they want it, but decent, right? So that makes me think she could do well with more time.
Mm.
The problems, the Federation has never been her biggest fan, right? And whatever the reason or that is, right? And then there's also the notion that she's not very flexible in her low spine, really her spine in general. And while that's not like a moral failing, it's hard for her to get some of these IJS positions. And when you've jumped like she has for so long, if your spine is not strong and flexible and able to move, I don't know if she'll ever be able to get spins strong enough to be able to beat the rest of the competition, or she would need to be doing like 2 triple axels to stand out, because there are other skaters doing triple axels.
Right.
She can't be missing triple lutzes, right? So she kind of has to figure out how she's going to get her points, and she has to be better than she's been at jumping and a little better at spinning to at least be in the mix. Because if you miss anything at Japanese nationals, they would love to put you in 11th place in the short program. The standard is just so high. They have
And
so
again,
many.
when you see that she was 15 in the short program, one is like, oh, it must have been an absolute disaster, but it wasn't.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
Japanese nationals, I get anytime I want a skater to do well at Japanese nationals, immediately I'm terrified for them. Because it just seems like that competition where every year someone really consistent without a lot of presentation does well.
Yeah.
It just feels that way to me. If you're a Kazuki or you're a Marin Honda or you are anyone that Mao Shimada or anyone that has like that little je ne sais quoi, that little pizzazz, I'm already nervous they're going to mess up and be like in 11th place. I mean, how many candles did we light for Wakaba to get to the Olympics? I don't even know.
Every step of the way was nerve-wracking. Yeah.
I didn't believe it until it happened, right? It was like getting Roman Sadovsky to the Olympics. Like it was great. I don't know if I have it in me to do it again. You know, like we have to manifest and pray in tongues and do all of that. So, I'll be someone like Kaori though. She shows up at Japanese nationals every year and delivers.
But like sort of in like a more similar way, although she has had more time back in her comeback, is Mai Mihara. And again, that was another one that when I saw she was 4th after the short program, I was like, oh, she mustn't have done as well as she wanted to. And then when I watched it, I was like, I don't know, it was really delightful. Another one that the Federation doesn't seem overly interested in boosting with extra help. I'm not saying her scores were unfair, but to the naked eye at a first glance, I thought she did much better than she scored.
I think she's a lovely skater. I think the Federation has liked her for a long time. And this is the part of when someone is older and they do have nice components and they're used to getting the marks, but you're at that crossroads. And I have to ask you honestly, because I do think that this plays in when you're judging a competition and you know that someone like that is on the bubble to make worlds. How much upward mobility do you think that she still has athletically?
Yeah, I think what you see is what you're going to get.
Okay. I've been nervous about her all season, and she's a fan favorite, so it's really tough to say this and go into it in that way because I also like her, right?
Yeah.
Inherently, she has a lack of power and explosiveness that was not a problem last season or at times in previous seasons when she's been at her best. However, this season is more competitive than last year. I think that next group of Japanese ladies, the Mone Chibas, the Hana Yoshidas, they're more prepared than they have been. They're doing triple axels. I'm sure Mia Hamada, being through her lawsuit, also probably has a little bit more energy and a little bit more Uh,
What ended up happening with that?
she wound up winning. So, or at least he wound up getting thrown out. You know, like it's good for her, right? So I would think if she's getting more aggressive and she's getting more interested, and you see her grooming so many talents that are moving up to kind of replace Kaori, that does mean that someone else has to move down. That's just the way sports works, right? Like if someone is moving up, someone is moving down. And I think for Mai Mihara, she could be the loveliest one in the show, but I don't know if she's never been the best jumper, right? The jumps can get a little under. And when you're against Mone Chiba, Monica Wabe, Hana Yoshida, they just have a little bit more oomph and a little bit more amplitude in their jumps. And I think that it's going to be hard for Mai Mihara to compete with them long term. And
And
she
now
did.
I guess we're back to that like age-old discussion because Mone Chiba did very well here.
Yes.
However, I feel nothing when she skates. I feel she's given nice poses and does them, and they don't add up to something emotional or performative for me.
Just to get back to look at Mai Mihara, I would compare it to Ashley Wagner her last year at Nationals compared to her previous years.
Okay.
Her last season, she just didn't look as quick twitch as she had the years before. Whether it was a hip issue or anything, I don't know. It just looked like she didn't have that quick snap, right? As an athlete, not as a person, skater, whatever, like just that quick timing. I'm not comparing her to Karen. I'm not, I'm just saying Ashley to Ashley did not look as quick, right? If you look like her best 2016, probably the fall of 2016 and, the spring. If you look at Mai Mihara, I just don't see her being around in 2 years and being one of the ones. So I do think that if judges are starting to feel that or have that conversation, that could hurt her. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because here, I'm assuming they send Mao Shimada to Junior Worlds only.
It's interesting because Japanese fans are so supportive of skaters, right? And we don't really get into these debates because the fans like to envelop and protect the skaters more. But it's interesting because the judges at nationals like this, man, they are tough and ready to do the work that is oftentimes shocking, right? And I think the judges made it very clear about who's moving up and who's moving down and who has to really show up next year. And someone like Wakaba would have to look amazing, right? And someone like Mai Mihara would have to look amazing. I just don't, like Wakaba has a triple axel that she could put back in, right? If she can get in gear and stay healthy. Mai Mihara doesn't, right? So at a certain point, she's a triple Lutz, triple toe. And how good is that triple Lutz, triple toe, or triple flip, triple toe, right? Like smaller, sometimes under rotated. You get Mone Chiba, Hana Yoshida, they're just like better jumpers at this point in their career. So I think that they have that kind of advantage. But
I will say, even though I find
but artistically, by the way, I would rather watch Mai Mihara.
Yeah, there's that perspective of a seasoned competitor and an older athlete, you know what I mean? That just is a bit more presentational.
She inherently has a sweet, not that we know her, but she has an endearing energy that comes out and a love for skating that makes her
very likable, I find. Very
inherently likable, right? Like you just root for her. She's been around forever, right? So even if she started as not one of the most interesting, she's so determined and hardworking and always has
more memorable at this point, which is interesting because that was almost one of her shortcomings when she was first really coming onto the scene because she was around so many giant personality colleagues on her national team, and that is not the case anymore. What some of the material I like the most this year is for Hana Yoshida.
All right, let's go into it.
I actually found I don't think she committed to either program like 110% like another skater may have been able to, but I really liked the thought process behind it, the music, the packaging. I was really into both of her programs this season. I know, and a somewhat surprising outing here for someone who had obviously been in the final, ending up in what, 7th.
To me, she's almost amazing.
Yeah.
However, her posture is nowhere near where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about aesthetically. I think in terms of functional movement, if she could improve her posture and really work on that off ice, I think even her triple axel would be better. I think her alignment and her ease of movement will be better. I'm working with a ballet teacher now on the ballet for figure skaters, women in net, right? But what it's teaching me about posture, and she talks about the dark meat, not the light meat, the muscles in the back, right? If Hana Yoshida pulled up, she would look so much better when she skated, and it would give her higher components, and I think it would give her just more of what Kaori has. Kaori could also work on her posture a bit, but Hana's to me is quite weak. Especially for Japanese nationals, like they have such good skating skills and posture and everything. So when you see a skater or two that doesn't have it, it's jarring, right? Like it really sticks out. And I think for Hana, that's the one thing, but she has that razzmatazz and she has that, especially in the short program, she has that little something extra.
Yeah, I'm kind of into it. I'm definitely into the choreographic choice and ideas. That's for sure for her this year. I mean, it was interesting to see Mao Shimada amidst this kind of group. Because I'm so used to her being the class of the field by a mile. And suddenly seeing her around other senior ladies, I was like, oh yeah, you still look pretty junior to me. An excellent junior, but still pretty junior.
Was it the short that made you think junior?
Yes.
To me, that short program hasn't worked all year. And I was looking at it. And again, it's slight posture because she's grown taller than she was last year and she's growing into her height because she grew a significant amount, more than Jia Shin has grown, right? So her upper spine is still not, fully where you want it, right?
Yeah, and it was a bit of shoulder slumping and like sort of short strokes. Yeah.
It doesn't help? The pants with the color, because where the color switches from white to black in the costume is right where she needs to pull the trapezius muscles back and the scapula together to get up. And that's where it's missing on her posture. And I found that short program really distracting all year.
Yeah.
Because costume more than anything else.
Which doesn't really inherently go with the music anyway. It's not like there's some absolute necessity for it.
It almost looks like every time she did it, I was like, are we doing Pirates of the Caribbean?
Is this Pirates? Is this disco? Is this...
I respect them doing it inherently. I believe, Mia Hamada would always do an interesting thing with Satoko and Rika, where she would usually use Lori Nickel for one program and Tom Dixon for the other, which I think was genius because often the Tom Dixon program would push the skater a little bit left of center, right? And then you'd have Lori to polish it and make it this feminine, flowy mystique, right? And I think the combination of the two really developed those skaters. So the fact that she is having Mao Shimada work with Caitlin Weaver and then also work with Lori, I think that that's very smart, right? Like I think that to keep pushing her and exposing them to different points of view and different movement, and Caitlin is young and she's current and she has this energy. I just don't think the costume really worked. But they've been doing that with Mel because she is so lyrical, right? In the free, if you look at this year's free, last year's free, but then the short programs are both more up-tempo. The Lion King last year, Lady Gaga this year. So they're trying to make her well-rounded, which I like. And that'll help her later on. That'll help her not fall into the generically lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that that's good. Where I think that they miscalculated is that sometimes I think Mia Hamada is a little bit aggressive, like a Terry. And while Mao Shimada did a nice triple axel, the quad is just not there this year in competition, and I would have pulled that out.
Mm.
To me, you can't make a mistake like that at Japanese nationals. You just can't. It's like in the Michelle Kwan day, if you would have fallen in your short program at US nationals, like remember one year Johnny popped and was seventh? Like you just cannot make that kind of a mistake at a nationals. Granted, she's a junior, so she doesn't have that same pressure. So I understand why you put out the quad. But at the same time, we're competing in an internet era, which feels different than TV. If you know that judges can just click on a link on your bio and know what your scores used to be as they're watching you in practice, they can already kind of place you in their mind of where they expect to place you based on your ISU bio. And skaters, especially lower rank skaters, will go to competitions to get a score that will get on their bio because they want it listed, because they want the judge to like kind of calculate where to place them. So you want them to place you with your highest score. So I don't think that it behooves her to do this quad toe if it's not consistent, because all the judges in their mind, when they're watching her, they're like, oh, is she going to win Junior Worlds or is Gia? Like they're almost competing against each other every single time with the internet.
It's interesting because I find both very enjoyable skaters, but to me, this is like a no-brainer. Mao Shimada is way ahead of Gia, don't you think?
Yes and no. So
Okay.
in terms of consistency, I think Gia has been
because she's not doing those wild card elements.
Yes. Now, at the same time, I think Gia needs to add those elements. And at the other point, Mia Hamada has rotation first technique, as they would say, very similar to Terry in some of these jumps, on the toe jumps especially. And for someone like Mao, she's really been struggling as she's grown. So she either needs to figure that out with those jumps or not do them, right? Like, because she can't make that mistake on the quad toe. I just don't think that the technique was ever the best to begin with. Last year it was scary. This year it's worse. So I think as she's growing, they need to figure out that issue with the technique, and especially with the strong prospect of Russia being back, and nothing being cleaned up with doping, right? I would expect to see triple axels and quads from the Russians. Not as many as before, but some. So someone like Mao Shimada, I get why they're still doing them, but they need to make it more consistent because you can't have a mistake like that. When she's a senior at Japanese nationals, I would be surprised if they put in a quad toe that's as
right. Yeah, when she's really going for that title.
Yeah. And I think if you're a smart coach, I think you're looking at this year and you're like, this is Kaori's time. She looked like she was in the peak of her athletic ability. I don't think either program was memorable.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Or a super fit to her specifically.
How do you think?
I know we talk about like the niece and the nephew or whatever it is in the short, and that's lovely. I'm not reading that engagement necessarily as an audience member.
Yeah, I was curious what you make of how she's performing the program. We've talked about them not being our favorite programs that she's done. I noticed a more relaxed confidence for her, which I thought was impressive at this competition.
Well, it puts me at ease a little bit because, again, last year, even at this point in time, it was still a very tumultuous roller coaster she was taking us on. And this year, she seems to have consistently, I have more confidence when she goes out there that I can relax to watch it. And I think she is showing that. Her body is giving me that also. She seems more comfortable in this role. She seems like to send me through her own body, language that she's got this.
Looking at what we've seen with trajectories of athletes, where do you think she is in terms of 2 years from now? She's talked about wanting to win Olympic gold.
It's a lot to ask for her to maintain this level for that long. Because like you were saying with Mai versus Wakaba, there is no, I don't know of an element she can add to boost what she's already doing. And I think we do see someone in their prime right now, and then it becomes that tricky bit of just trying to maintain.
I've always wondered if she could do a quad, right? Like a quad toe. But then I think we would have seen it if she.
We were, or at least heard about it, seen a practice video or something.
I remember her triple axel. Remember the year that they were all trying triple axel in the summer? Hers was not one of the better ones, though her double axel is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
We haven't seen clips of her practicing it since then, so it could have completely improved. I wonder if it will be tough for her, but at the same time, I don't know who else is coming up to really displace her. So, and I think she's showing more mental toughness than maybe we even knew she had, right? Yeah. Not that last year she was clearly the best in the world, but there were ups and downs, and she talked about how she viewed herself. This year she says that she views herself as being the winner, and she's been very dominant and consistent. I wonder, is there going to be anyone to push her? Is there going to be anyone to kind of keep her coming back? Because though it's annoying when you are in the lead to have someone on your tail, and oftentimes it seems like judges will take care of rivalries by eclipsing points to make it more competitive, whether it's subconscious or deliberate or whatever. It seems like by the end of the Olympic cycle, there's always a rivalry, right? Typically. And maybe not always, but it seems like, there's more, it's by the Olympics, there's more neck and neck. I would be curious what will happen, because I don't know. I think she can get great programs, but she's performing her elements about as well as she can do them. Like, where are you going to?
That's the thing. I don't know where it grows from here. So it really is just about staying here and keeping,
And the fans were pointing out that her Lutz edge has improved. She's been working on that. So, there was a big Twitter controversy this week while you were sick. You know how the Fanyu, all fan groups do this. They will post a video of someone from like 2 years ago for no reason, and they'll brag about something that they did. There was a whole debate on Twitter that Yuzuru Hanyu only did 5 crossovers in his program 2 years ago. Now, here's the thing. It was 2 or 3 years ago, the program. Whatever short program they put in there. The program is phenomenal. Okay, the program is phenomenal. He has wonderful transitions. I don't believe in counting crossovers as a indication that you're better or worse, because to me, the steps have to be musical anyway, right?
Right.
I think saying, look at these transitions and look at how impressive what he is the real story here, right? But you know that there are 2 parts to a crossover. There's the crossover and the cross under. They got in a debate about whether or not a cross under is the same thing as a crossover. Now, by and large, these are many people who don't skate. So they're not counting the cross.
Like you're saying, who else is counting that as a badge of honor? I don't.
The fans on Twitter, when Kula King and all this stuff started to happen, people started counting like the number of turns in like quantitatively, which to me is so like anathema to what skating is about to begin with.
Right. But it's what we're trying to fight against with this.
They have also used it as like a quantifiable measure of how good someone was. And I'm like, this is so arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
And of course, Megan got involved in the whole deal. My answer to it is, it's a great freaking program. I don't care.
And that's the takeaway. But yet it's always like kind of alarming when you're like, why is that not your takeaway? Why do you think that was beautiful because of something mathematical?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess they just want to talk about how good his skating skills were and are, which is correct.
Yeah. but they're looking for like some sort of like number to prove it. And it's
to me, the number doesn't prove it. To me, I'm like, look at his knee bend, look at his glide, look at the way he oozed over the ice.
so
That's
much
the
more than counting crossovers and or unders.
look at how he gains speed on an inside spread eagle, right? Like those are the things that I would more than But fans do that a lot, and they're getting involved in skating, and that's great. There's just more to it than merely quantifying.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, it was actually interesting. I thought, like, where does Kaori fit in, for instance, if Russia is back? Because I was like, yes, she has improved a lot of things, but like, still very Kaori. And I was like, I had accustomed to seeing this in fourth, fifth.
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts after watching Russia Nationals.
Without Sophia, who I think would have been potentially one of her biggest rivals if she was still competing, Akacheva.
Yeah, but she might be done with the number of injuries that she has had, right? You have Petrosian who wins, but isn't super consistent. Like she falls with a lot of her victories, right? But Eteri has not been involved in that school very much, and she's been way more involved in Diana and than what she and opening things. And you could see that she's not the same level of Eteri that she was before. I think the particular Russians who are at the top. What's going to happen to Valyeva? Is Valyeva going to will herself to magically get better? I don't think so, but she's survived much longer than I think I would have predicted based on she keeps getting taller, which makes your coordination more challenging. And it's inherently, I mean, the triple toe at the end of Valyeva's program looked like she was going for a quad with the amount of effort she needed to do to get it around, right? I honestly, I can't see Valyeva beating Kaori. I think Kaori is just too mentally strong at this point. And I think if Valyeva were to compete outside of Russia, it would be much more difficult psychologically because you know that the judges aren't potentially pushing you up as this martyr and symbol of political propaganda. I think that Valyeva, and I would be curious how much Valyeva trains now compared to what she trained before the Olympics, based on injuries and promotional activities and whatnot, right? Like they don't seem like they are 1,000% in. I even noticed in Mishin and Galyamov, it looked like they hadn't run the program a million times. Like it just didn't look as polished as a Moscovina program typically does. So not knowing how much what the intensity of the training is hard to know because maybe this time in a down slope of maybe like this being your pro years, right? Like could help Valyeva come back. But she'd either have to get really healthy and train 1,000%, or I think she's done. I don't think any of them would actually deserve to beat Kaori. Now you could get into weird things about base value and GOE, and there are people that will start to fight this. This one does this quad. But I will say with 2 years out from the Russians, I don't know how you feel. I'm less willing to go back to pretending that their programs were good.
Well, and yes, we've always inevitably drawn comparisons between Russian and Japanese nationals because they both happen over this holiday for us.
And they're the two biggest markets in skating, right?
The Japanese ladies were making a stronger argument this year. I like them all. They're lovely, but suddenly they have fallen into a very understandable trap where now all of their programs look the same. Mind you, the sameness of their programs is a far more pleasing program to me than the sameness of what the Russian programs have become for a while. I just don't know. I mean, Kaori is delivering, and on a personal level, I am like, it sounds patronizing. I'm very proud of her. Like, it's a very cool thing to watch someone sort of go through and conquer these sorts of things. Like, that's awesome. But still, the aesthetic, it doesn't always pull me in as much as I wish it. The Matrix, that's the program we're still talking
I
about.
loved last year's programs. This year, listen, I get it psychologically. She's a different place. You don't want to take the risk when you're going for,
And I applaud her because her plan is working in the results and in her consistency.
What I will say is, in terms of the Russians, maybe Plushenko's skater would have a good chance when the age change goes through, because there are even Russians who will say, listen, Petrosyan's skating skills are atrocious, inherently atrocious, and it's why she has such a weird rhythm going into her quads, and it's why they're so inconsistent and forced. Okay, and it comes from her basic glide. What I will say is that Terry has not spent the amount of time crafting the personas of these skaters, right? They don't have the personality on the ice or the charisma that Kosternaya, Sherbakova, or Trusova had, even Valyeva, right? And from that, that tells me that she's checked out. Either she didn't pick the same level of skater or she's checked out, right? Meanwhile, so if Petrosyan gets any taller, the skating skills will likely be weaker and she will struggle with the jumps. That keeps Kaori closer to the top than you might think. Plus, with the quotas, Russia will only be having one skater. And I think for them, they don't have one skater who's like amazing right now, right? Muravyova, not great artistically. Petrosyan can't skate. She goes for the kitchen sink with quads. She falls, she wins, whatever. Valyeva, who are they really going to put out for that one quota?
Right.
Do I believe that next year they'll be far more competitive and that they'll be pushing to get that spot? Yes, but they don't have the dominant person. And the same thing in Japan is that there's like a lot of shifting among skaters that haven't distinguished themselves behind Kaori, right? Like Mana Kawabe, Mone Chiba, Rina Matsuki. This, it's almost like who's good on this day.
Right. There is so much interchange. And even again with Hana Yoshida being seemingly one of the better Japanese women this season, as a result of her being in the finals, for her to just kind of get buried in the standings among other people. It was a pretty neck and neck Grand Prix season, I find, for a lot of the Japanese women also. They were all kind of right in that area.
It is exciting because I think skating seems like it's about to wake up again, right? Like we've been in a really hard, we've probably been in one of the weakest periods of the sport, almost like after the plane crash. I think it's really what happened in 2022 between COVID and the doping and the retirements of so many superstars and everything happening, right? All at once, and the peacock of it all, and the VPNs, and right, like it all has happened at one time, and it's really been a problem for the sport. Now, I think we're actually going to see a period of rapid growth before the next Olympics.
Oh, I hope you're right.
I sort of can feel like, if you think about it in terms of energy, one of the biggest problems is that we don't have a bona fide superstar in skating. We used to have Yuzuru Hanyu, Virtue and Moyer, Papadakis and Cizeron, Nathan Chen. These were people that were not just people that were at the top of the craft for this cycle, but you knew that they were going to be remembered for a long time. I don't think you can say in pairs. I don't think you can say in women's. I don't think men is a little questionable. Like they are some phenomenal talents, right? But they're still not the level of persona or dominance of Yuzu or Nathan, right?
Well, or even, I'm sorry, it was that Japanese men's national in 2014 that I was, oh my gosh, this was my Olympic top six. I would have watched this as a final group at any world championships.
But it has just felt like we're still rebuilding. Like in dance, the field is good, but there's nothing legendary happening, right? But then when you start to look at Instagram today, and I see Papadakis and Cizeron showing off their choreography that they got at the Paris Opera for the ballet, I'm starting to think they're making moves, right? And they're that level of talent to come back. That sort of adds a new energy and an interest to the sport, right? Then you start to think, oh, we have some skaters in the US who are moving up and down, moving up and certain things like that. Then you look at Vincent Joe, who's just doing collegiate skating and shows for Christmas, and he's tossing off triple axels and triple lutzes and triple flips like they're nothing. When you look at how inconsistent the US men are, I'm like, Vincent could easily make it to the Olympics and get a team medal and actually stand on the podium this time, right? And not have COVID at the Olympics. Probably pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
I don't see Nathan coming back, but I could see Vincent coming back. And that would add interest, right? And depth to the US. I would look at everything that's going to happen when the Russians come back, whether you want them back or not. I believe that Christina always talked in journalism about what do you root for? She's like, you root for the story, which that's like a really different thing than what a fan roots for, right? A journalist roots for something happening so that something is right. You have something to write about that's fascinating, right? So in that sense, it's kind of like how Obama had a certain level of charisma and Trump had a certain level of charisma, and then Biden really doesn't. So the story is not as good, right? In terms of sports, you're rooting for that star and that person to root for. The story of Russia coming back when nothing has really been
changed or resolved. Yeah.
And how people will respond to that and judge it, especially on the heels of Valyeva with nothing being done about it, Terry, and yet Daniel Grossel went, and then everybody seems to be just not talking about something that obviously is pretty damning for Terry and this skating in general, right? That's a huge story when they come back. I mean, Kaori Sakamoto switched countries because Daniel Grossel's spot opened up, right?
And he got a bronze this weekend. Circelli now. He is Circelli.
if you're covering Worlds in 2025 or 2024, it just got so much more interesting, right? It's like when Tessa and Scott announced their comeback, and it was a game changer, right? Yeah. I think if Papadakis and Cizeron come back and dance, that would be a game changer. I think just adding in one or two Russians, the level of competitiveness, whether it's fair or not, is more interesting. And frankly, fan outrage will only boost things on Twitter, which will only boost the stories for when people are mad about how the Russians come back and are scored.
Yeah.
We have been living in this very sort of pleasant demeanor in skating for almost 2 years where people are winning medals that maybe they wouldn't have normally won. But then you think about when the Russians come back, holy moly, it is game on, right? Like it's
really, I still harken back to like what Dick Button used to harp on after the breaking up of the USSR and where those judges went. Like, I think it's the reintroduction of all of those judges based in Moscow representing varying flags that can really throw this whole thing again, because we've not been seeing as much of that, as much of those kinds of judging antics, I feel, without the Russians competing. I find in general there seems to be
Doug Williams. Did you see that? U.S. Judge Doug Williams in trouble by the U.S. In trouble by ISU. Sorry, official warning for national bias at the World Championships. And when you look at what they are citing him for, it looks like he didn't do his judging machinations well enough to hide it. Like his score for Isabeau was too high.
Okay.
Right? And I think because national bias, if you go to skatingscores.com, happens all the time, he may have upset someone. Like, who did he upset? Was it a Canadian? Like, who did?
Who was the one that felt they were getting the shaft based on that score? I mean, it was really, even at Grand Prix finals, some of that weird judging with Ilya and the short program and stuff from the US judge. Like, there's some weird stuff going on, but to me, nothing as nausea-inducing as it was during certain times.
I do think next season, my prediction is that the scoring will be too high for like someone like Petrosian, but I don't believe it will be as high as when Terry was just dominating all the time. Like, think about when we went to Skate America and Sherbakova did the quad Lutz for the first time, right? And Terry was so dominant at that point that, yes, we had known the stories about her. And yes, all of their antics were going on, but they were so dominant. And the product was relatively polished for them, right? Like, it was trained, at least, flexed feet and skating, when they come back next year, and if there's fewer spots available, so like let's say each Russian is at a Grand Prix like a lone wolf, okay? And there's one of them rather than three of them delivering solid performances, I think that the judges might be more willing to put someone second or third that would have won a competition before.
Really? See, I guess
Yes.
I'm more skeptical and think they'll all rally to push them even more.
I think that, yes, of course, but I think the brand of a Terry has just taken so many.
Weekend, yeah.
Look at Diana's kind of sloppy, right? Petrosian is very sloppy. Valyeva, Maya Hromik was last at Russian Nationals.
Right.
I don't think a Terry will allow this to happen when it matters, right? Like when they're actually coming back, I don't think that they're going to allow this to.
But again, a lot of what we're talking about was not Russian bias as much as it was an Atari bias, like you're saying. Like, we didn't see some of the men getting all that extra bumping like we definitely saw for the
disciplines that they cared about. They really fought hard in, and they didn't seem to believe in their men for a long time, right? I think that without having the number, and I think part of the Terry's magic is like the Karolis, where they just have the numbers, right? They're going to overwhelm you at competition by having six or seven great skaters, which inherently gives you a cognitive bias positively towards all of their competitors when you see the coaches at the boards. Right. But if you only see them for one skater, and that skater is Nika Agadze, you're not going to be like, I got to give them the good marks. I'm going to be like, well, look at those Atari skating skills, right? Yeah. So I think when they come back, it will be more difficult.
Yeah.
In time, right? All of this will even out over time. But I would look at that, and they will have to get super competitive about which team to send, which is great for skating. I have to say, whether you like them or not, Mishina and Galyamov and Boykova and Kozlovsky will have to fight for one quota at Europeans and Worlds the first year. That's a rivalry I'm tuning in for, right? That's perfect.
100%. And then the question becomes, do you split them? Do you let one do one and one do the other?
And by the way, that's a Terry against Moskvina at the twilight of Moskvina's career, when she has earned so much esteem, and a Terry could be knocked down a peg. Not that I think that she'll wind up taking it publicly, but privately, if you think, well, her skater was the one that caused all of this problem at the Olympics, right? And then Valyeva, when she's eventually punished, potentially, right? And you have it coming back that she's against Moskvina in Paris. That's a really interesting dynamic. Boykova might not have the sentiment of the judges or the federation behind her in that sense. I mean, Moskvina has earned a lot of positive things on her own, and she seems more comfortable and not as rattled by a Terry, right? Like, she doesn't seem like she cares.
Well, she's just so settled in who she is and what she does that I don't think she's as open or susceptible to all of that. Yeah.
There was a great shot of her congratulating Boykova with how Boykova skated, and just in the demeanor of the body language of what she said to her, you thought, this is a very mature, seasoned person who basically congratulated Boykova, who knew her well, but who didn't seem like she was personally emotional that she left her, rather that she understood it, right?
Yeah.
Why it happened. And seeing that, I thought that's scary because she can play the long game. Okay. That's a woman who can beat you at chess. Okay. She's just like, let him go.
Yeah. Good luck. Hope you find whatever it is you're looking for.
And she won, right? Like, so in that sense, when they come back next year, yeah, I want to watch. That's in terms of rooting for a story. Yeah, I want to watch that. Right.
Yeah. Dave, I need to use the restroom for a moment. I'm really.
So let's discuss the men here because this was quite the competition. You shimmied here.
I watched this different. I watched this different because of Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
And we love Alyssa.
We do love Alyssa, but the Shoma fans don't always love her.
Count me among them. No, not that I don't love Alyssa, because I love Alyssa and I understand.
Were you staring at his head the whole time to see if it was moving?
Yes.
Staring at it constantly.
And I was like, I understand what it was like when Ma first pointed out Hanyu looking down. And I remember both of us in that moment being like, I think you just gave us a complex we'll never be able to shake next time we want to.
I've never been able to shake it. With Yuzu,
Yeah.
I've never been able to shake it.
Yeah. With Shoma, though, there is what I find emotional about his skating is the commitment to the positions he is getting in. So it may not be this facial like sort of angst or emotive display facially. I sense it in his body as he strikes certain positions, that those are emotionally committed positions. And I love that, like, minimalism turned Claire de Lune. I know it is off the wall. I know it is bonkers. I am so into it.
So here's the thing. I have a thing on the ice. Obviously, I'm a very expressive person. I think people would say that. But facially on the ice, I am self-conscious of being Piper Gillis and don't engage. I try to engage more with my body to feel more sincere, but obviously the face is part of acting and that's something to work on. Okay, so now I'm watching Shoma's head and how much it's moving. He does move his head, right? But he doesn't move it as freely as he could or that he has in certain programs. What I have noticed is I went back because now Alyssa has me staring at this head. It's like it's a bobblehead, right? I'm staring at Shoma's head constantly. Okay. All right. When he's very relaxed, he does move the head with the music. I think in last year's free skate, the head was part of this line that extended to his toe. I don't feel that this free skate is as crafted. I sense in the music and some of the choreography, it is smaller and less free than last year. He did the Jonathan Byer expansiveness, right? He was big. He was taking up big energy with that music.
Well, that's Paul Wiley, also a smaller skater in stature that skated enormously big.
Paul, so much. We love him. We love.
But Shoma has a reminiscent thing in regard to that, as someone who doesn't maybe take up so much space, owning that space anyway. Yeah.
You know how exhausting it is when you're away from the Paul standard of skating, you're like, but then you want to go back up to it, right? You want to then strive for it again, but you're like, oh my God. And you know what's the worst part about it? I work with these sarcastic Russian guys or Ukrainian who are like, come on. They give you the attitude, you can give it right back.
Yeah.
You can curse at them in Russian, like the whole deal. You can't do that to Paul. He's such a nice person.
Yeah, I would think it's not that dynamic. Yeah.
He's so intense, but in a very positive way, which is very different, right? Where he's breaking through your ceiling, but in a positive way. Whereas the more Soviet way is to just do it by force.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very mentally different to be pushed by someone who you're not actually getting angry at, and yet you're being pushed so hard. It's such a different place to be in psychology.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't say I know.
I have not worked with a coach as intense as that since Galena. But
again, then it's a muddled experience because of the
Galena would tell me that my being gay made her want to take a shower, right? So when someone is saying that to you as they're trying to get you to jump, and then someone is saying to you, believe in yourself, you can do this. It's so different psychologically.
yeah.
And your nervous system is learning how to jump in a calmer state, where before I was used to performing in a revved up state where
Right.
someone would say the meanest things to you, like you're not a man or you aren't this. So then you strive to get that jump because you want to prove them wrong. And you have this like thing inside of you where you're like, I am not going to let you define that as that's who I am as a human being. I'm going to go do it, which you're only playing into their hand of what
Right.
they're saying to you, which
Right.
is how you know how this goes with the Terry when you watch those documentaries, right?
Right.
But then when you work with someone who's very positive and who's just getting you to jump from technique and self-belief and whatnot, I believe it will ultimately be much more successful.
And
But it's
sustainable, yeah.
right. But it is a mental shift to not have this feeling of when you get on that back edge that you're going to actual jump, that like there is no goddamn way I'm missing this because I'm
Yeah.
not
But
here.
again, you just think, even as you sit there and you inhabit that emotion, the whole body changes. Everything a different way.
We're not going back to it. Okay.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah.
When you become awake to it, you cannot go back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I became awake to why I got injured doing off-ice jumps with this coach and not with that coach. That I did off-ice jumps with every day and I did the same thing, but I got injured 2 or 3 times with this person. Is that because my body felt inherently unsafe?
Right.
Something about their energy made me feel like,
Ugh.
it
Yeah.
made me feel like I'd go train with a Terry and that she wouldn't care about me and that I would miss 3 drug tests, right? Like that because I wasn't protected. Like there's that level. I don't think I would feel safe around a Terry.
Yeah.
No. I don't. I think I would disassociate and get injured and whatnot, which I would not be surprised if that happens. Right?
We had a very different coaching situation here at Japanese Nationals where it's just Carolina and Stefan Lambiel hanging out.
Right. And
one assumes a very different approach. Yeah.
Both like skating skills, right? And there are some skaters who, when you look at it, you're like, what would make Petrosian's jumps better? If she learned how to skate, right? What these boys can skate. I did notice, so I was looking closely at Yuma and Shoma because I'm looking at it in 2 planes. One, I think Shoma's time is now and has been, right? But Yuma, though he's already an Olympic medalist, there's still that feeling of like youthful potential. When
I don't even think he's hit his stride yet or is near it yet. Yeah.
And when I'm looking at him, I'm automatically calculating in my mind, how do I think he is artistically versus Shoma? How do I think he is versus Ilya and Adam? What does he need to be competitive? And I'm curious what you think the difference is in what it's going to take for Yuma to go from being a silver or bronze medalist to a gold medalist.
Well, first, I mean, given that this is a comeback, I think, again, and we have discussed this on other episodes, where I think the smartest thing he is doing is biding his time. He's doing less and he's doing it well, as opposed to this idea of trying to come back too soon, which has then also afforded him this time with Carolina and Lori, or whatever the combination is, to sort of explore this more artistic way. Skating skills are great. The artistry still is a little bit, and we see this among a couple of the skaters here, is that they are doing the thing they are told. It just doesn't seem like it is generated from their own body yet. And I think he seems to be with the right people to cultivate that more. Because I think right now also, and coming off of an injury, all these sorts of things, I sense a little bit of that. I'm now doing this. I'm going to be careful. I'm now going to go into this jump. I'm going to make sure I don't overdo it. I get some of the thinking in the programs a little bit, especially in the free skate. I find he's able to sort of mask it a little bit better in the short program.
He has a similar issue with Kazuki, as far as I'm concerned. What they both have is a love of skating, a warm demeanor that translates to the audience, right? So you inherently root for both Kazuki and Yuma because they have an openness of spirit, right? When they're performing. They both have the dangling leg from the knee down that they do not extend. And it obviously comes from the core and the hamstrings and everything, right? I think inherently Yuma needs to work on shifting the chest up a couple of degrees and extending the legs down, because as long as and the leg is important because he's competing against Ilya Malinin, who has very long legs. Now, if Ilya can learn to point them,
I'm clarifying. Are you talking about in the air or in general?
no, I'm talking about in general and just like in a basic cross under. You know, when you cross under and to stretch and point that leg out. Sometimes, even if you look in the footwork, Yuma's leg can just be kind of bent like a fire hydrant. And to me, that's the difference between him and Shoma right now, is that extra +1 in GOE I'm gonna give to Shoma across the board when I can, even though he does a flip from an inside swizzle with that weird technique and that his jumping can get a little wild. Everything Shoma does, almost every leg extension Shoma does is typically finished. There are a couple that will be not finished and they stand out glaringly, right? But he looks so finished at every point, and Yuma doesn't yet, but that's why that they have Carolina there. So in 2 years, can he get more finished? I believe he
I would imagine, yes. And especially, I think, as they have not just like, it wasn't Carolina worked with him for 2 weeks and then bailed. She seems to be around, which I think is how these changes really take shape, especially after having spent the full season with him. How they decide to pick the material for next season is going to be so much more informed by having traveled with him and done all of this year.
I mean, have you ever seen anyone like whittle something with like a pocket knife? You know, like they just keep working on it and working on it and working on it and working on it. I think that's kind of like his overall aesthetic with what they're doing with Carolina. I don't think that the full package, the technical content and the artistic, is where it needs to be this year to be world champion. So that doesn't mean that he can't win, right? That would mean that he would need to be consistent. Others would need to make mistakes.
Well, in a positive way, it means it's probably not their goal. Because if that was the goal, they would be making more foolish choices, I'm afraid. Yeah.
I think that they need, and who knows, but I would imagine that they're working on quad loop, quad flip, quad lutz to put those in the program at the right time. It might not be for this year's Worlds, but I do think next year he'll need those. But next year, I think is his time. I think this year is still Shoma's time. If the Fed has to pick one horse to back going into Worlds, I would back Shoma, right? But with the understanding that I don't think Shoma's going to be better in 2 years than he is now. He's already talking about how tired, you know, and giving quotes that are revealing, right? I think that Yuma needs to just keep working at it and working at it and working at it, because the one thing that Yuma has is this Ali Raisman consistency, to where I would say that there are perhaps skaters that could be better at one, you know, more extension or more line, right? But he's so mentally strong that he delivers a good skate, if not a perfect skate, but a good skate almost every time out. So that's someone that I would believe is going to nail it at the Olympics. Do I think that Yuzuru Hanyu is a better skater than Yuma? Yes. Do I think that Yuma was better prepared for the last Olympics? I do.
Yeah.
Because Yuzu focused on that quad axel, he had injuries, right, going into it. I think Yuma was more prepared to deliver a long program.
Yeah.
Period. And that's why I believe that he got the results that he's gotten over the last years, because he was more trained.
Yeah, 100%. It was interesting because I think going into this nationals, we knew it was Shoma and Yuma. And like we were discussing in the women's event, there were a lot of players that could have fit into this third category. Was it going to be Kao? Was it going to be Shoma? Was it going to be Kazuki? And there was a feeling I had early on where I was like, I bet it's going to be Sota. And it almost happened to me when he did not make the Grand Prix final. I was like, I bet that's the one, the athlete who is now completely focused on nationals and going to come out swinging. Is that the one you send? Does Japan typically follow just their results?
So they're sending Kao to Worlds. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I'm inclined to think that's the right choice.
It is probably, right? I'm just double checking that I read this correctly and that I'm not giving bad information. Let me make sure that this is updated because that's what I read.
They're sending Marin Honda and drag.
Yes. Right. So I was Sota is so steady, right?
And I believe he's doing what he's told.
He just lacks X factor.
It just doesn't add up to anything to me. And
you know what it's like? It's like picking the Olympic team between Nicole Bobek and Tanya Kwiatkowski if you have to go in a back room. And it's sort of the thing where you can't tell Tanya Kwiatkowski that she did anything wrong.
Because she didn't, except inherently not have that star quality that Nicole did.
Yes. But Tanya probably did everything right with the training and with the work every day.
And probably smiled as big as she could have and tried to make the gestures bigger and, you know, did everything that she was told might help her.
It's the same thing with like a Rachel Flatt or a Brady Chanel.
Yeah.
You're so steady. You are so consistent. But is that steadiness almost a detriment because you're not taking the risks,
right,
in terms of the performance? And right, is it truly inspired?
Yeah.
Oof, right? Like just
because I mean, even, you know, some could now look back in hindsight and say, should we have sent Tanya Kwiatkowski? But of course, having had Michelle and Tara,
well, I think you have to look at what is the goal, right? Is this a team competition where you need everyone to hit? Or did you think that you had first and second locked up and you wanted to make a roll of the dice to being like, maybe we could get a bronze if everything goes?
Yeah. Do we take the risk at having a really good placement or potentially just not at all or guarantee a middle?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sota is sort of a guarantee of a middle, I'm afraid. You are correct in that.
I mean, it's a high middle, it's 6th place, 8th place, right? But it's a great, respectable showing, which Nicole didn't wind up performing with injuries at the Olympics. Right. But I still understand why they sent her.
Right.
No, and she did great at nationals. So you have to look at that. And it wasn't technically on the whole body of the season, right? And Nicole was Nicole on the Grand Prix that year. So, but she was spectacular at nationals. So I understand why they sent her. And I don't actually view that as being, that felt like a no-brainer at the point. The point where I think it's actually unfair to Tanya is when those Campbell soup cans came out, or she found out that they were going to film them. How does that impact you psychologically going in?
No matter what you do.
Are you going to strive and have that extra 20% of energy that you need going into a big event? Or are you going to feel fait accompli, right? That it's just going to happen. So I think that there's something with Sota. He's kind of that skater, right? Like, he's a placeholder.
And again, doing really lovely stuff. And you know that you could tell, I think it's the short program, they put like some really heavy, like cool music on. And he's doing things that he was told would look cool, but he's inherently not being cool. And again, it's this like cliche question of like, can you teach X Factor? I believe somehow you could maybe find something to draw out as someone, but I just don't think it's happening here.
Now, I'm curious what you think of performance. Kazuki, to me, has X factor.
Almost too much.
He lacks a little bit of confidence and consistency. For me, does he believe he's inherently a top 3 skater in Japan, or is he freaked out by the technical content of others? Because to me, remember when Lambiel, his biggest annoyance with Shoma in the early years was when Shoma would quad double.
Right.
Kazuki quad doubles often, right? Which is just giving away points. In a field like this, Shoma has a higher tariff, right? If he makes the quad double, he's going to survive, unless he's Yuzuru Hanyu, right? Kazuki's not. He can't make these mistakes. Then you go into his program music for this year, and to me, it muted him as opposed to La La Land, which elevated him.
Yeah, La La Land was somehow one of those perfect things where like the tempo and the energy of the music allowed him to bring that energy. It didn't get overwhelming, because I think sometimes when people try to like bring this big energy music, it actually backfires. I always felt that about Keegan's music. When you've got certain skaters that know how to listen to the music and it gets too whipped up into a frenzy, I find their jumps backfire because they're almost too excited going into all of them. And this was something we were talking about with Amber Glenn this season also, like, what is the right vibe music to go into these massive elements? Is it something big and exciting to get the adrenaline going, or is that already going? So actually something a little more calming is going to set them up better for. And I know Kazuki's so musical, I would think that would be a huge factor in his consistency.
There's an expression in sport that I think Kazuki has to take in, which is to swallow the bitterness. And what that would mean in this situation is he needs to feel the sting of being right there, and that he was there last year, but that he's been in this 3rd to 5th place corridor for a while. And he needs to mentally figure out how to never be there again, and to have it be so clearly above. And this is someone who I think could do another quad or two, right?
Yeah.
He also needs a little bit more extension and confidence, and he just needs that winning music again, right? And I think that everything together just didn't come off without a hitch this year, right? It was close, but it wasn't.
That's when it's even more frustrating. It's not like it was such a waste of a season and now you have to make all these changes and all of these things will happen. You're still lingering right near it.
He was consistent this year in a sense where it wasn't like he had disaster after disaster, right? Like he's been steady, but it's been steadily like a half step below where he needs to be to get to Worlds, right? And I think for him, he needs to push even harder for next year, but I think that this will do it. Will Shoma even be here next year, right? So the field will change in a year, but he needs to drive that energy to make that change in his benefit, because he has that special quality.
He really does.
He needs to get a little bit stronger in terms of just the overall belief and the overall commitment. I feel the same way about Shun Sato. When we watch him, inherently he's a very steady skater, but again the lines are.
I do respond just on a gut emotional level to Shun skating a bit more than Kao's.
Yeah,
for me personally, I know that like the judges go with Kao.
I think Kao's is atrocious, and I think that the all-white costumes of the last year only wash him out even more, right? Yeah. That you have someone who's not inherently colorful, and then you put them in gray and white and suspenders, and to me it just makes him drab, right? Yeah. It emphasizes.
Where again, Shun has that thing, and again, I think he's being told what to do with the moves, but he is committing to them, and it's a little more interesting to me overall.
Yeah.
I really liked, I think it was not this season, but the season before, it was like a flamenco short. I don't know, there's something, he can do something with this if it's cultivated. So of those like middling guys, with the exception of Kazuki, who I think has X factor for days, to me, I kind of look to Shun Sato for it. But the judges seem to be feeling very confident with Kaori.
What was your moment of the event? Because to me, there was one camera shot. I have a couple moments of the competition.
Okay, well, there was the camera shot with Carolina and Stefan. That's just charming and fluff and fun. I don't know. What was it for you?
It was this awkward camera shot of Yuma, and I don't know if it was like raining, but it was the way he held his face at the time, and he did something with his fingers, and the way that the camera caught him at the certain angle.
In the program when he does the little spirit
Yes!
either side. Yes.
That was charming yet cringy yet charming yet.
Face was like,
he was too serious in the face based on what was happening, right? And I think that's why it stuck out to me.
I'll imagine Kazuki Tomono skating down the ice, crossing his hand and be like,
like, come on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, inherently with Kazuki, I feel like they dulled him out this year, and he didn't become as polished as he needed to be. And I think that they need to use that charm to be aggressive.
That's his secret weapon, especially in that field. Agreed, 100%.
But maybe it's okay for him to have a little bit of a down this year so that next year he can come out swimming. So,
okay.
But Marin Honda just stole my heart at these championships. I don't know. There was just something about.
And also, like, I know they have to have these rules, but for them to have had all of those ladies, women, and only not let like 3 or 4 of them compete in the final, find an extra 15 minutes somewhere and just.
Like, I want to see Marin do the Little Mermaid. You do too, okay?
I do. I want her to be part of my world. Yeah.
Yes. We need her in the ice shows. How are the siblings doing? What's going? We don't hear enough from them. What's Ansu doing? Right? Like they gave us. I mean, think about that season. We had Ansu and Marin and Mariah Bell and Zhinya Medvedeva and Alina Zagitova and
Mariah was still around then, wasn't she? Yeah. It was a cat.
Like what a field of riches. I mean, there was that Kazakh girl that went from like 14th place with Brian Orster magically.
Silver medal and then a broken hip and never skated
again. Never saw her again.
Worth it?
Were those marks accurate? I don't know, but it was entertaining, right? There was something. That was a time.
That should be studied. I mean, it shows you right there. Yeah, they lost.
We are going to miss Marin Honda so much. I hope that she becomes that flight attendant that she always wanted. I mean, maybe in a music video, like a Britney.
Yeah, or a nice Japan Open special performance.
Like a Tamisha. Remember she was the flight
attendant? Like as the flight attendant, 100%. Yeah. As the stewardess. Yeah.
Oh, man. Hold it at you look sexy, everyone. Bye now.